Good morning, St. Francis. Good morning, people of God. It is Tuesday, the 14th day of October, 2025. It is Tuesday of the 28th week of the year, the 28th week in Ordinary Time. I don't know why I have on my glasses. I was reading, so, okay, there I am. Okay, so it is 28th week in Ordinary Time, Tuesday. Let's see. I'm in my room because I'm getting ready for a couple of things. So doing the reflection from inside today. Let's see, as we continue with the letter to the Romans in that first reading today, now we get into some of the meat as to what Paul is going to write to the Romans about the Christian movement and what it means to believe in God through Jesus and everything that follows from there. Paul unfortunately begins kind of from a negative way by chastising the Romans for their practices and their way of life, which for Paul, everything that the Romans do is evil. And it's evil because they do not acknowledge God, and they've not bothered to acknowledge God or tried to acknowledge God. And because of all of that, they're destined for destruction until they begin to do so. And so Paul is opening the door for them to be able to acknowledge God so that their lives do not end up in perdition and things like that. Not really a great way, perhaps, to begin. It's not necessarily the way of enticement or it's the way of persuasion that some other of the early Christians would do in talking to non-Christians to bring them on board. But Paul always has, a thing about him, and so it's usually filled with fire and passion. It's filled with an intensity and a dynamism that, again, did attract people to the faith in some ways. And so this is where, again, Paul is just beginning. It's like the Romans, knew who God was, but they didn't do him honor, or they knew that God was there, but they didn't really care about worshiping that one God. Instead, they made mortal images out of snakes and beasts and whatever it is. And the thing is that they try to image the Creator as themselves rather than understanding who the Creator is. So much today, basically, we still kind of fall into that same sort of weird category in which, we want a God to be more like us than us to try to be like the God who tells us to love and to forgive and to be merciful and to give and to not judge. It's very easy for us to switch that around into what's best for us because again, we find ourselves holy, or we claim ourselves holy, we claim ourselves blessed, or whatever it is. And out of that, basically, we decide that we're going to create a God who feels the same way about us that we feel about ourselves. And yet that's not how it is. It's never really how it is. And we see this harm that happens all the time when we try to place ourselves on the throne of God and kick God out of the throne that is rightfully God's. We cannot continue to do that. And we cannot continue to embrace that kind of God and come to the fullness of life here, as well as life to come, with that kind of mistaken identity and that kind of mistaken understanding of who we are and who God is. So Paul is opening this up to the Romans, and again, opening it up for us to try to understand a little bit better who we are in relation to this wonderful God who loves us. In Luke's gospel, we come to Luke 11. It's got this wonderful kind of insights into never invite Jesus to dinner, because you never know what you're going to get. Again, all these wonderful pious people who think that Jesus is just as pious as they are would love to have him to dinner, and then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose, as it does here. Because again, he's invited by one leading Pharisee, and it's like, why did the Pharisee even bother to comment on the fact that Jesus didn't wash his hands? Because you should wash your hands before you eat. Everybody knows that. But Jesus doesn't. And he's doing it to test the Pharisee, and the Pharisee got distracted by this action. And why is Jesus setting up the Pharisee and all these kinds of things like that? But because of the Pharisee's comment, Jesus again rails against the Pharisee. Because again, there were elements within Pharisaical Judaism that cared more about appearance than what was actually happening on the inside. And just to look good and to look right and do the right things without really any effect in the heart or any feeling in the heart was enough at times, it seems, for Pharisaical Judaism. But it wasn't enough for God. Again, it's not just what's on the outside that matters, but always what's on the inside. What are the means by which we operate? How do we understand what we do does? How do we understand the impact of our actions in each other's lives? That is what matters, not these external kinds of things that everybody can ooh and ah over, but which really are empty inside because they mean nothing to us and mean nothing in the doing. We don't want to become Christians who become hypocrites. We don't want to become Christians who are just there for show. We want to be people who enter the lives of others to transform and make them new. A blessed day, St. Francis and people of God. May the Lord give you his peace.